CIT 1121, Module 10, Submodule 2, Configuring Interfaces. In this section, we're just going to go through some outputs of how to set up an interface for IPv4 and IPv6 and look at some show commands or show reports on what you'll see if you type in different show commands. So let's take a look at those. First one, here we finally got there. Interface. Okay, so we're going to set up an interface. We're going to be in global config mode, and we can do a couple of different things. Number one, interface, we have to identify the exact interface of the device. So usually, well, not usually, always, if the device is right in front of you and you're looking for the value of the interface itself, it will be written on a sticker or a painted color. It'll say something like G or Gigabit Ethernet 0/0, 0/1. So it'll tell you there's a sticker next to each one that'll tell you which interface you're actually plugging into. If it's a generic interface like a serial interface, you'll just use the command serial as opposed to Ethernet for like fast Ethernet or Gigabit Ethernet. But you'll have to identify which physical location you are trying to configure. The second thing they post in here is description. The description value is something it's optional. You don't need to add a description. You could say something like link to internet or path to ISP or gateway for production network, stuff like that. You can put in anything that you want in for the description. It doesn't have to be descriptive of even whatever you're doing, but that's what it's there for. It's supposed to be descriptive as like a note that you could leave for yourself. If you log back into it, you have an idea what's going on there. Now, ideally, keep this in mind. I'm not a huge description person because I'm a big picture person. And in most cases, when you're going to leave these classes and you're going to go out on your own, you're going to be working in routers. When you have multiple routers and multiple switches, you should have a network diagram that shows you how everything's connected. I mean, a real detailed thing that shows you what interface if there's something cabled in, it should tell you exactly where it's going. And I'm a network diagram person. I would rather look at a diagram than read the descriptions that are in the interface configs, but that's, you can use them if you'd like to. So description. The next two pieces are IP address and IPv6 address. An interface on a Cisco device can have both an IPv4 and an IPv6 address if you so choose. And thanks to the magic of link local addresses, IPv6, you can have more than one address. You can have a link local address and you can have another global address. And in most cases, that is going to be how you're going to set up your interfaces on your Cisco routers with IPv6. So you'll do two IPv6 addresses. The last thing is the no shutdown command. No shutdown is posted at the end of every time you set up a configuration. You want to type in no shutdown to bring the interface into an up state. By default, Cisco router interfaces they're not electrically charged. There's no electricity going through them. They're turned off. They're 100% secure because you can plug something into it, nothing's going to happen. You have to go into the configuration of the device and type in the word no shutdown to even get the electricity started. So it's like an on-off switch. So no shutdown is like on, shutdown, obviously, would be off. So keep that in mind. All right, moving on to the next slide. Here's just a config for an interface G0/0. Notice the highlighted router 1, and they're logging into router 1, and there's like, okay, on the left-hand side, that particular subnet is the 192.168.10 subnet. And so we're going to give it the address of the default gateway because that would be the default gateway for PC1 in that switch if it's configured. So you would just type in IP address 192.168.10.1. Notice you have to put the subnet mask in after that, and you're good to go. If it's also set up for IPv6, you can put your IPv6 value in after that also. We haven't really talked about the CIT notation or /64 or what that means, but don't worry about that right now. Just know that that's a correctly formed IPv6 address, and just look at both of those and then start getting used to those formats, okay? The next piece is that no shutdown, and we're pretty much ready to go here. So that's an interface that has been configured for both IPv4 and IPv6. This slide is how to configure interface G0/1. So we've moved from, on router 1, we've moved from one side of the router over to the other side of the router. We're now looking over here, and that address is going to be 209.165.200.225. Keep in mind, whenever we put an IP address on an interface, we do have to put the subnet mask in after it. In this case, this subnet mask is 255.255.255.252. More on that when we get into Module 11, because we haven't really talked about subnet masks yet. But be aware that you have to put in the IP address and the subnet mask. IPv6, you still have to, you do the same thing, except for you can use the CITer notation of /64 instead of using the actual subnet mask value there. So just be aware of that. No big deal there. Moving on to the next slide. This is a really cool slide. This is one of those slides where you might want to memorize what's going on here, because it's giving you the show commands. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about show commands, but essentially a show command is just a report about some status of the particular router. So one of my favorite commands in all of Cisco is show IP interface brief, and you can shorten that down into show IP INT brief. That's what I usually type in. So I was typing show IP INT brief, and that just gives me a quick rundown of all the IP addresses of the interfaces that are configured on the router, and if they're set to being in an up state. So we'll look at a readout or a report for show IP interface brief in just a second. For all of these commands, they're set for IP, but later on IPv6 came around. So if you wanted to see a report about IPv6, the command is IPv6 interface brief, not just IP interface brief. Same goes true for show IP route, show IP interfaces. Same deal, right? So it's all there for you. And we're going to look at some examples of each one of these in just a second. Let's look at show IP interface brief first. And you can see it's a really nice, gives you a really nice breakdown of what's going on the router. We got interface G0/0 and G0/1. They both have IP addresses. And as we move over to the right-hand side here, they're both in a status value of up and a protocol that is in an up state. Okay. Now look at interface VLAN 1 for this router. Interface VLAN 1 has no IP address. It is unassigned. And it is in a state that is called administratively down. And the protocol is down as well. So what administratively down means is this. If you do a show IP interface brief, and you see that an interface that you've configured says administratively down, it just means that all you have to do is just type in is no shutdown, and it'll go into an up state, as long as it's plugged in, of course. But administratively down usually just means you're the administrator and you haven't enabled the interface to go into an up state, so you didn't type in no shutdown. That's usually your clue. If it's in an up-down state or a down-down state, administratively is not listed, now you're looking for, if there's you're looking for a problem with your cabling. Is the interface actually plugged in? Is it plugged into the device that it's supposed to be plugged into? Stuff like that. So down, down is bad. Administratively down, usually not so bad. Just I forgot to type in no shutdown. Up, up is really the best thing that you want to see. And status up is really like layer 1 status. Like you could consider this to be layer 1 status. Do I have electricity on the interface? Did you type in no shutdown? Yes. Is there a cable plugged in? Yes. Is it completing a circuit? Yes. Okay, we're in an up state. Great. Protocol basically says this. Protocol says this. Can I read the frame header? Is the frame header readable to me? Yes or no? I'm receiving frames from other devices. And that's where protocol comes in. Every once in a while, you'll have something that's called protocol mismatch. It just means that the frame headers that you're receiving are not formatted in what you're looking for. It doesn't happen very often anymore. It's actually happening even less and less and less. But there are different formats for frame headers. Let's talk about those. Ethernet 2, 802.1q, which we didn't talk about in this class, and we won't. But PPP, HDLC, there's others. If you're not getting the frame header to be read by your interface, then there's a problem, because the frame header is the thing that tells you how to read the packet header. So, excuse me. So that's basically that. All right, let's move on to the next slide. This site's called Show IP Route. This is showing your routing table. We haven't talked about routing tables yet in this class either, but I do want you to be aware of the fact that a router can send information to an interface based on the network that it's on, and it identifies those networks with a letter C for connected network. This particular router is connected to the network 192.168.10.0/24. It is also directly connected to the network 209.165.200.224/30. More on all that in Module 11. But for now, just be aware that Show IP Route shows you the routing table of this router. More stuff's going to start appearing in the routing table. It's the most important table on the entire device, and it is basically the roadmap. So what a router basically does is it reads information that it receives. It reads the destination MAC address in the packet header, and it figures out where it's supposed to forward the information to after that. The place that it looks to figure out where to forward something is the routing table. So it is the roadmap that is used to forward information from one place to another. And the only reason that you have a router is because you're trying to forward information from one place to another. Otherwise, there's no reason to have it. So that's a little bit about that. Just very quickly, the last two commands is show interface, and then they also have show IP interface. So show interface is going to give you all the information about your device. Now, a couple things. I want to go up here. Whoa. Look at this and look at this. So that, even though it's formatted a little different than what you're used to, that is the MAC address of the interface. That's your MAC address right there. So your MAC is AEEOAFODE140. Great. The second one over on the right says BIA right here. This is BIA. BIA stands for burned in address. Burned in address. What does that mean? It just means, burned in address just means this. This is the address that is given to you by the manufacturer of the device. If you were spoofing your address, which means lying about what your MAC address is, these two values would be different. Since they're the same, you can see that this person is not spoofing or lying to the rest of the network about what its MAC address is. Okay, so just be aware of that. So MAC address will show up in a show interface. And it also gives you your, here's your IP address here. Other relevant stuff, bandwidth, how fast is the interface, maximum transmission unit size, about 1,500 bytes. It's pretty normal. Reliability, don't worry about that stuff. It's not for today. All right, moving on to the next one. Show IP interface, same stuff as we saw before. IP address is still here. Subnet mask is identified. MTU size is still here. You know what's not here? No MAC address. So if you do show IP interface and not show interface, the MAC address is not going to be listed for you. That's just kind of one of those things. And when you do IPv6, obviously it shows you your IPv6 information. So you can see your IPv6 address here. Here's your FE80, your link local value. And if you have a global unicast address, it'll be listed there as well. And it's all posted. So a little bit about interfaces and configuring interfaces.